With any kind of luck, this will be recorded. It's always a little bit up to the god of technology, who can be a pretty fickle god. So you never know, but we're trying to record it. Even if not, though, there's a lot of help materials that you can get to very easily on your own. You can go to our website, which of course is seattleavionics.com. Click the big FlyQ button, and you get to lots and lots of videos. We have about a dozen or so on YouTube. But even if you're within the product, right now this is FlyQ EFB on the screen. I'm going to dive into the product, but I want to show you one thing first, and that is a little bit below where it says 9:41 a.m., which I know is not the right time. There's a button that looks like a gear. That's a settings icon. I'm going to click on that. And one of the first things that you see is the help menu. Under there, it has what's new in this version and technical support/help. I'm going to click the technical support/help button. And that shows you a bunch of things. This is how you get to our YouTube videos, how you can download our pilot's guide, which is about a 100-page document that you can print yourself, how you can learn more about ADS-B through our ADS-B primer. You can read the online frequently asked questions, the FAQ, or you can send us an email to support. To give you a sense of that, I'm going to click the video link, and this is what we look like on YouTube. So there's a lot of information here. I'm going to scroll this up a little bit. There's lots and lots of videos. This section here, for example, is a 7-day challenge videos. Now you only see 3 of them right now. That's just what fits on the iPad screen. But if you notice, there's a little tiny button that looks kind of like a V, sort of a what you might call a more sign towards the bottom of that, right above the line. If you click on that button, it shows you all the other ones. So you can actually get to all 7 of the 7-day ones. And then you can close it. Okay, so that's just to give you a sense of what you can do with the product. If you don't see all the video, if you miss something, whatever, you can always catch up and see lots and lots of training material on the product. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit about how the screen is organized first. FlyQ EFB is designed to give you the maximum amount of screen real estate devoted to the stuff that counts, which is to say maps and approach plates and so on. It's designed to minimize the amount of screen real estate wasted on things that you don't use very often. So one of the things that we like to do, the other thing that we try to do is we call it the rule of 2. The rule of 2 means you should never have to tap more than twice on the screen to get to information that is actually important while you're flying, okay? So with those 2 things in mind, let me give you a very, very brief tour of the basic features, the basic areas of the product. All right, so hopefully this is working now. As I say, it's a little bit of an experiment for us to see how well some parts of this work. I'm going to try something. All right. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing a little cursor that shows me what it is that I'm pointing to right now. It's going to be a little hard for you to follow, and I apologize for that. But on the very top of the bar, you see a bunch of gauges and so on. The gauges will give you the information about your ground speed, your GPS altitude, your track, and so on. Above that, and you may have to resize your window, your browser window a little bit if it's getting clipped a little. But above that is a search box area that says SEA in it. There's a button to the left of it, and then there's a series of buttons to the right of it. That area is always on the screen. All of those buttons are things that we think are important enough that you want to be able to use that from just about any place that you are in the product, okay? So by doing that, so with those little areas in mind, all of these things are fairly commonly used features. These are the ability, just kind of going left to right here. There's a lock button. So you can lock your iPad in case when you're flying, you want to hand it to your friend, you want to make sure the screen doesn't rotate, or you tap something by mistake. Very, very nice to be able to do. The button next to it controls the screen brightness. The one that looks like a big down arrow, I'll show you more about later. That's how you download data to the iPad, because of course, while you're flying, most of us anyway, don't have access to the internet. So you have to make sure that you pre-download all your maps and approach plates and such before you fly. To make that even easier, we have a button next to that that looks like an aircraft taking off. That's kind of what we call our pre-flight takeoff checklist. Again, I'll show that to you in a little bit. But that makes sure that you get all the data that you need for the specific flight that you're doing. So if you're doing a flight in the Pacific Northwest, you're not going to download data from Florida. but you'll download everything from along your route. The button next to it is the one about the gear. I already showed you that. And the one next to that, it looks like half black, half white, is night mode. Again, I'll show you all of this. The point mainly is to say that these features are available at all times during the product. All right, let's get some movement in. Let's talk about the map. The first thing you may have noticed is that we seem to be mid-flight. We're mid-flight because I'm using one of the other great features of the product, which is the built-in GPS simulator. So I'm going to zoom in the map a little bit. Looks like I'm flying someplace. Looks like I just flew out of the TAC area, and now I'm flying on the Seattle area sectional, flying along. I can take two fingers. I can rotate the map however I feel like doing it. If I take my one finger and I swipe, I move to another area on the map. By the way, the application is considerably faster than what you're seeing right now. Because of the presentation software that we're using, it's a very, very slow redraw rate. And I apologize for that, but there's not a lot that I can do about that. Now, clearly, I've moved way off my map. I can't see where I am anymore. And this happens a lot if you move the map around or if you rotate it or something. So we have a series of buttons on the left-hand side. See these buttons right here? Looks like a stack of, it's on the left-hand side, kind of a column of 5 buttons. I'm going to tap the second one from the top that looks like a track, kind of like a lock button because, well, that's what it is. It's a GPS lock. What that does is it instantly moves the map back to, to where you are in flight. Right now, we happen to be in a particular rotation mode because I just spun the map around. But the icon below that looks like a compass. If I click on that, I toggle between track up mode. Notice in track up mode that the aircraft is no longer centered on the map because most of the time when you're flying in track up mode, you don't really care. You mainly care about what's in front of you. So we move the aircraft icon down to the bottom to give you more screen real estate about the parts to count. Now, if like many people though, you prefer to fly in north up mode, not a problem. North up mode is just like looking at a map straight up, so all the text is right side up. To do that, I hit the button that looks like a compass again. So right now it's blue. If I tap it one more time, it becomes white. And when it becomes white, the aircraft moves to the center and the map rotates around so you can read all the text. Okay, so this is what we call north up mode. If I tap it again, that is in track up mode now. Okay, does that make a lot of sense? Okay, so fairly straightforward on using the map in kind of basic ways. One of the other things that people use, and I'll show this more a little bit later, but a really great feature of the product, especially when you're using a larger iPad, not necessarily so much an iPad mini. If you take a look at the upper left corner of the screen, next to the word Seattle, actually to the left of the word Seattle, is a button that looks kind of like two things splitting. That's our split screen button. At any time when you're using the product, you can go between single screen mode, what we're looking at right now, and now if I tap that button, I go into split screen mode. At the moment, you may wonder, well, why do I want to have two maps on the screen? Well, you probably don't, but conceivably, you can have completely different things on the map. You can have different zoom levels, different rotations, or just not even have a map. For example, I'm going to tap on the pane that's on the left-hand side. When I do that, if you take a look down the bottom of the screen, you now see the tab bar, the airports, weather, plans, and so on. That area wasn't there a moment ago. The reason for that is because we tried to, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, we tried to make the material that you don't need, like tab bars and things, get out of your way when you're using the product most of the time. The way that I got that tab bar to appear was simply to tap or move any place on the map. Now I'm going to hit the button that says airports. So I'm going to hit it twice. And now what I see is a very, very handy feature, which is showing us what the nearest airports to where I am at this particular moment in time is. Okay, this is constantly being updated as we fly, which is really terrific. So as a VFR pilot, I really like this feature because it means that I'm always safe. In case of an emergency, so I'm flying along here on my map, I can't see on this side, but something's coming up. If I want to go immediately to a particular field, like let's say that I want to go to Strom Field, you can see the cursor here. There's a series of, hang on for a second. So there's a series of 4 buttons here. The one in the upper left looks like a map. That will take that airport and center the map on that airport. The one next to it is what I probably would use in an emergency. In that case, I hit direct to, my flight plan gets changed, and I'm going immediately to that airport. If that airport has procedures, which Strom doesn't, but the one below it, KTDO, Ed Carlson Memorial, it has approach procedures. So if you take a look at that little button that looks like a document, looks like papers, that means approach place that you can look at. Or the button next to that, which is to say the one that's lower right corner that says plus FP, that means add to flight plan. But at any point while I'm flying along, I can modify my flight plan by going direct to with one tap. I can add an airport arbitrarily anywhere within the sequence of my flight plan by hitting plus FP. I get on the map and so on. Very, very convenient. Okay. Now, I can also do things like I can find out more information about one of these airports. Like let's say that I really did have some kind of emergency and I wanted to know, well, let's not take this airport. Maybe take one with a little bit more stuff in it. Let's say that I want to fly to Olympia Regional Airport. By the way, notice that the airports in the list here are color-coded. So the one that's on top of the list, Shady Acres, is purple, it's magenta. That's what you see on the sectional for an uncontrolled airport. Olympia, on the other hand, KOLM, is blue. It's blue because on the sectional, blue airports means that it has a tower, it's a controlled area. You'll also notice that under Olympia, there's a yellow indicator that says MVFR. The weather in Seattle is not very good today. So it's telling us that we are in fact seeing marginal VFR conditions in Olympia. If you look down the list towards the bottom of it at KGRF, Gray Air Force Base, which is actually a joint military Air Force base, you see that the button under there is green, meaning that there's VFR down there. Also, you may have noticed this, but a second ago, the screen refreshed itself. You see, as you fly along, this list is constantly updating itself. So you always know the distance and bearing to each of those airports. That's the first line in the list. How long the runway is, what the TPA is, what the fuel prices are, when they were last updated, and you even see the frequencies for the tower, for ADIS, and for ground. All of that you see without doing any taps at all on the map. As I said also at the beginning, we focus on something called the rule of two. The rule of two, again, means that you shouldn't ever have to tap more than twice on the screen to get to something you need. Even better is something like this, where you don't have to tap at all. If I need to contact Olympia Regional, everything I need is on the screen right now. I don't have to even touch the map. Isn't that handy? All right, so that's some of the information, but let's find out more information about one of these airports. So I'm going to tap on Olympia, and this is the kind of information I see. I immediately see my elevation, my pattern altitude, and so on. I see two graphic images. In fact, now, as I said earlier, you can switch between single screen and full screen, split screen and single. I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to tap in the upper left corner of the screen, again, near where it says SEA. I'm going to go into single screen mode now, so you can see this information a little more clearly. So in the middle of the screen, you see a graphical image of that says satellite, and another one next to it that says FAA Diagram. If I tap on the satellite image, you do see an actual, it's not technically a Google Map image, but basically it's a Google Map image. You see the satellite image of what you'd see for this airport. You also notice that there's an arrow there, a green arrow that says 15, and you may rationally wonder, well, what does that mean? Why is there an arrow there? The arrow is telling us that the wind is coming from the south, going to the north, very slightly northeast, and the ground speed for that wind is 15 knots. Okay, so very, very quickly, I'm going to close this now, you can tell just at a glance that the runways that you ought to be landing on, of course, are the ones coming from the north going to the south. Very obvious, very graphically clear. Same thing with the FAA diagram. If I click on the FAA diagram, you see the same thing. So I think pretty obviously, we should be landing on runway 17. You can probably see that yourself. By the way, if that arrow gets in the way, there's a button that says winds off and wind on at the top of it. Right now, the winds are obviously on. If I tap the button that says off, the arrow goes away, and I can more clearly see the diagram. Of course, I can pinch to zoom, and so on. All very quick, very easy to do. All right, so let's close that. Again, following in the rule of two, you don't have to hunt and peck for information you need. Like all your comm frequencies are here. Your runways are here. On a lot of other applications, there's a ton of little buttons and little tabs that you have to hit to get to this stuff. We think that flicking up and down with your finger, which is what I'm doing right now, is really fast, really efficient to do, and doesn't require any great dexterity while you're flying. You can do this in the chop. You can do this, even if you don't have the same dexterity you may have had when you were 23 years old, okay? We tell you what the crosswind component of all the runways are, and so on. What the nearest nav aids are, very clear. If you want to know what the weather's like at Olympia Airport, there is a series of tabs along the top of the screen. Right now we're in what's called the general tab. If you move to the one that says weather, notice, by the way, that this tab is pretty big, pretty easy to hit. So it's a lot bigger than on a lot of products because, again, we really focus on making it easy for you to hit things. Right, so I now clicked on the weather, and on one screen, without any more taps, I get all the weather that I need. I immediately know that it's raining. Well, I'm in Seattle, so no big shocker there. So it's raining, it's 45 degrees outside. I see my local, my regional, and my national radar all there. Notice that the local and the regional, by the way, are animated. Notice that they're also very new. So right now, according to my clock, it's 4:18, but the regional radar was updated just 8 minutes ago. If I want to see that bigger, I can just tap on it, and I see a full screen image to it, or rather a much larger image of it, like that. And again, it's fully animated, so basically the weather is pretty crappy in Seattle today. I'll close that. If I want to take a look at the METARs and the TAPs, I can do that, of course, too. So I have my METARs, I have my TAPs. If I want to see those a little bit bigger, again, very, very easy to do. I tap on it, and look at that. Now you see it very big, very easy to see. So even if you wear reading glasses, like I do, you don't have to really use them to be able to read the text on the screen. You can imagine that if you're in some kind of choppy condition, maybe low visibility, low light, something like that, it's a lot easier to read this than it is to read this text. So the METARs and the TAPs are there. This particular airport has its own METAR and its own TAP. On a lot of smaller airports, of course, they may not have the METAR. They frequently won't have a TAP. If that's true, we automatically find the airport that has the closest METAR or that has the closest TAP, and we display that. If I scroll up, I see the winds aloft from the closest FAA winds aloft reporting station, which in this case is Seattle. And if I scroll down even further, I see I got a weather briefing. This can either be from Lockheed Martin, or at the moment it looks like I've selected CSC Duox, but they're both there. Incidentally, if you're going someplace that you're going to stay at for a couple of minutes, notice the current temperature where it says 45 degrees. In the middle of that is blue text that says tap for a 7-day forecast. Blue, just like on most web pages, means you can tap on it. I'm going to tap on it. And now I see what my 7-day forecast is going to look like. And once again, it's rain and rain and rain. Looks like by Thursday, we're down to rain is only likely, not an absolute certainty. Okay. Procedures. Now, many of you, in fact, just about exactly half of our customers are IFR pilots. I'm going to click the Procedures tab, and let's take a look at what procedures look like just a little bit. So you can pick anything. Notice that we organize this in a way that you probably would actually use it. We don't list departure procedures and arrival procedures first because, frankly, most of us never fly those things. Most of the time, you need an airport diagram or you need an approach procedure. So those are the things we list first. And then the departures and all the things used less frequently by GA pilots are down the bottom. So I'm going to pick an approach procedure. If that's not the procedure that you want, you can just take one finger and flick it back and forth, left and right. Very, very simple, easy to do. Notice that there's another button bar on the left side of the screen. It's going to go away in a moment. That button bar was there to help us do other things we may want to do, but gets out of the way most of the time. For example, if I hit a button bar icon that looks like kind of a list of items, that shows me all of the approaches at that airport. That's because now instead of swiping, I can just pick a particular approach and you can see it appear on the screen. That can be extremely handy, not so much for an airport like this, but for an airport that you have 20 or 30 different approaches, you don't have to flip through all of them. You can immediately go to the one that you want, just with a tap. When you find the one that you want, you tap off the pop-up and it goes away. If you want to see this on the map, by the way, notice on the right-hand side of this approach procedure, there's a map icon. I'm going to tap on that. Now look what it did. Here's our map. I'm going to rotate this around a little bit. So the map is here, and the approach procedure is now superimposed on here. It's semi-transparent because sometimes you want to see what's below there. In fact, more realistically, you probably don't want a sectional below the approach plate. Typically, you'd have an IFR map. So let's do that. I'm going to show you a little bit about all the map layers. So right now we're looking at sectionals. One tap and it can change my base layer to an IFR. I'm going to zoom in a little here. So this is really handy because now you can see the IFR map through here. And if you want to modify your flight plan, like here's my magenta line. Notice I'm flying over, I'll show you this on the screen here. I'm flying over this pointer called Alder. But let's say that instead I want to fly over this one right here, which is part of my approach procedure. This is a Quora. What I do is I simply press and hold on the map. I drag my point over to Quora. I don't have to hit it exactly, just approximately. And then I'll tap the Fixes button down the bottom here, and I'll tap Quora. And now my flight plan is modified. Okay, let me back up a little bit here, and you see the point. So now we're flying on the approach plate, and the reason for that is it makes it very, very easy to rubber band your approach procedures right into your flight plan. You don't have to do any typing. It's just kind of there, easy to do. All right, other things that are fun to do on the map. Let's hit the map layer again. Now we're flying in IFR low. I'm going to switch back to the sectionals, honestly, just because it gives me better color contrast. I can hit the runways button. By runways, look what it did. See, it knows I'm going to tap on airports for just a moment. So remember that we're looking at Olympia Airport. Okay, so we're looking at Olympia Airport. So now when I look at maps, it highlights automatically the airport that I was just looking at, again, Olympia. And it shows me what the runways look like. And if the runways have anything unusual, like a right pattern instead of a left pattern, then you see orange icons. So near runway 8 and runway 35 are orange icons telling me the direction they need to fly on this. Okay, it's telling me there's a right pattern there. There's no icon on runway 17 or in runway 26 because we don't want to clutter the screen with stuff that says normal. You normally fly a left pattern, right? So there's no point of pointing, a little awkward there, but there's no point to showing that, no point to highlighting that because it's normal. We try to keep the screen cluttered down so that you can focus on the exceptional, not the usual, okay? Other things on the map that you can do. Let's put some fuel prices on. So I don't know about you, but I'm pretty cheap, and just about every pilot I've ever met is pretty cheap. So we use a lot of color coding in the product. We know, generally speaking, green is good, red is bad, and either yellow or orange is kind of in the middle. So anybody want to guess what the cheapest fuel price in the area is just by looking at the color? Right, $3.90 because it's green, a little bit below Olympia. You probably don't want to look at the ones that are 553 and 560 and 565, which are in magenta, but you stick with the green. Color coding is a really big deal in the product. We use that a lot. I'll hit that stack of papers icon again, maybe turn the fuel prices off. By the way, often people ask, well, I put the procedure on the map, but how do I get rid of it? Well, here's how. You see the word procedure is now highlighted under the other category on the layers? Turn it off. Just tap it and it goes off. It's just a layer, just like anything else. If I want to put it back on, I do this. I'm going to jump around a little bit and show you one other trick. I'm going to go into split screen mode here for a second. And check this out. So now I'm on, I'm going to pick particular approach procedure here. Zoom in a little. Now, on the right-hand side, I'm showing the same procedure, showing RNAV runway 35. I'm going to flick it on the right-hand side. Watch what happens on the map. Isn't that cool? So it switches it on the map and keeps them in sync automatically. You don't have to hit any buttons at all to do that. It just knows that whatever approach plate you're focused on is the one that ought to be on the map. Okay, really slick, really simple. I'm going to take it out of split screen mode again by hitting the button in the upper left corner again. Let's go back to single screen. All right, let's go back to talking about the layers. On days like today, and honestly, most times, most places in the country when you get into winter, you care a lot about the weather. So I'm going to hit the stack of papers icon, and there's a lot of different weather layers that you can put on the map. By default, the radar layer is on, so I'm going to turn that on. I left it off at the beginning of the presentation because, well, there's simply so much of it. It just covers a lot of the map. By covers a lot of the map, by the way, sometimes that's a little bit too dark and you can't see enough of the map. So you can hit the button towards the top right above where it says waypoint BTG. This is a button that looks like kind of like brightness control. You can change screen brightness. That won't have any effect here. That only works on the device. But it can also change the radar opacity. So I can make it so that the radar is super dark and all you see is a radar, and you can't see the map through it at all. Or I can slide it back the other way, and you can see more of the map, keep sliding it, and you barely see the radar at all. Okay, I'm going to leave it somewhere in the middle. Same thing, by the way, with procedures on the map. You can make the procedures super dark so they completely cover over the map, or you can make it very light so you can barely see the procedure. Okay, entirely up to you. To get rid of that, you just tap off. Okay, fairly straightforward. Go back to the map layers. Right now we're looking at radar. We then have two different types of satellite imagery. I'm going to zoom this out a little bit just by pinching the map and tap it again. I'm going to tap on the one that says satellite IR. Satellite IR is satellite infrared. Let's zoom this way out. So now you can see what the satellite image looks like in covering very, very large amounts of the country. In fact, actually large parts of the world right here, okay? The reason why we have two different satellite layers, though, that is a satellite using the infrared, which is to say the temperature, really, that the satellites are seeing. I'm going to turn that off and turn on satellite visible. Satellite visible isn't showing anything in this area. Well, you'd think, well, that's silly. Why is the satellite layer not showing anything? The answer is because it's visual and it's nighttime in most places. So the satellite visual layer is terrific in the daytime because it's going to show you essentially what you'd see if you use your eyeball looking out. But just like your eyeball, if it's dark, it's not doing anything. So the satellite visible layer is kind of useless for night flying. Instead, you pick on the satellite IR layer. This gives you a lot more. Okay. I'm going to hit the button that looks like the targeting site. In fact, I'm going to hit it twice to zoom into my location a little closer. Let me spin the map around a little bit. Let's get rid of the radar. But I'm still very interested in weather. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the button that says METARs and TAFs. And now you see it's all color-coded. So you see a lot of different colors on the map. Just below where the aircraft icon is, you see a green icon. I'm going to tap on that. That's telling us that the METAR there is currently reading that it's VFR conditions. Okay? On the other hand, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. If I tap on Olympia itself, which is a yellow icon, it's telling me that the weather conditions are marginal VFR. That's yellow. And then over by the coast, on the left-hand side of the map, you have the IFR or instrument view. Again, it's big, easy to see. If you're a pilot who prefers the translated, it's right there for you, easy to read. If, on the other hand, you're a pilot who prefers to read it the way that the government published it originally, we have what's called RAW. So this switch is right at the top right side of that pop-up. So there's RAW, a lot more compact. A lot of people really prefer that. So it's RAW, that's translated, okay? All available there for you. All right, so we spent a lot of time on the map, which may make you think that all you think the product does is focus on the map, but it does quite a lot more too. So let's take a look at some of the other features that are in the product. Right now, my tab bar is invisible. I can't see it because it'd be getting in my way. So if I just tap somewhere on the map, it comes back again. I'm going to tap the weather tab. The first thing the weather tab does is shows me Miami. That's a little bit cheating. I wasn't going to do that in a second, so hang on. All right, so the first thing that the weather tab will do is it will give me whatever the closest METARs and TAFs are to my current position. I'm going to split the map again. Because by splitting the screen and then switching to the map, right now we're looking at procedures on the right side. If I flip the map, okay, so now you can see where we are in the map. What it's doing on the left-hand side is it's showing me whatever the weather is like nearest to wherever we are. But right now we're kind of going towards central Washington. We're looking at Kelso. So it's showing me information which is about the airports near that area. That's a little bit different than when you look at the information for a specific airport. So now you get not just one METAR, but you get a whole series of METARs in the area. Not just one TAF, you get a series of TAFs. Okay. One of the things I think is most interesting about the product, though, is when you think about your own flying, one of the things that you do is you spend a lot of time doing almost nothing, right? When you're actually cruising along, you're talking on the radio sometimes, but a lot of the time you're just trying to decide, should I go fly, should I fly a little bit higher, should I fly a little bit lower? Okay. One great way to answer that question is to use the Winds tab. So right now we're in Weather, and we're in Weather Nearby. That's Weather Nearby. Next to that is a button that says Winds. I'm going to tap on that, and look what we see. This is what we call our wind optimizer. It's a completely unique feature of the product, something we invented about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. This feature is terrific because it graphically tells you how high you should fly. Green is good, red is bad. So right now, if you take a look at the GPS gauge on the map, we're flying, it looks like about 11,500. If you take a look at this bar graph, there's a grayish bar at 11,500. And what it's telling us is pretty clear, that the altitude we're flying at right now is pretty good. We see a green bar that says plus 27. That means we're picking up a 27 knot tailwind by flying at that altitude. If we were to fly lower, like say we were to fly at 4,000 feet, then we'd be picking up a 4 knot headwind component. Okay, so clearly the altitude we're flying at, which I believe this flight plan I created a few minutes ago using the wind optimizer feature of the product, that's why it picked that altitude. Okay, so there's the right altitude to get me there as fast as possible. You also see, by the way, on the upper top of this graphic, it's showing us what the aircraft looks like relative to north and where the wind is coming from. So as you can see, it's actually really, really strong wind, and it's mostly a side wind. But given that it's so strong, it's 50 knots, we're still picking up a lot of tailwind. Okay? If you want to see even more graphics, we have the weather gallery, which is right here. So on the weather gallery, it gives you a choice. It's kind of a drill down list. You begin at US or Canadian. I'll pick US. You have a choice of which graphics you want to look at, radars or prog charts, wherever you like. I'm going to pick, I happened to have been at my son's soccer game yesterday, and it was extraordinarily cold. My feet felt like they were going to fall off. So I'm going to take a look at the freezing levels. I'm going to look at, say, the current freezing levels. Then, let's say they wanted to look at a little different altitude or a little different time. You may notice that there's, on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, there are little buttons. So I'm going to pick the button on the right, and I'm going to move to the 3-hour forecast. I'm going to tap that again, and I go to the 6-hour forecast, then to the 9-hour forecast. You get the idea. So I don't have to go back to the previous level and tap again. It's one tap, not two, to get to the information you need. I'll click Done to close it. You can also search for any kind of weather you like. Like, oh, that's cheating a little bit. But so since the weather is crummy here, I want someplace a little bit warmer. Like, let's say I'm thinking about taking the kids to maybe Orlando. So I'll type in Orlando, hit search. There's a lot of airports in their area. But let's say I just take Orlando International. And let's see what the weather is like in Mickey Mouse Land. Looks like it's 73 degrees right now, which is about 7:30 at night, and it's 73, as opposed to about 45 degrees here in Seattle. Sounds pretty good. All right. Other things that you can do with the product, there's a lot more to it as well, as you can imagine. So let's take a look a little bit more detail about flight planning. So I'm going to hit the button down the bottom that says Plans. And the first thing it does is it shows me my recently created flight plans. Recently created, some of them are green, some are orange. You may wonder what's that all about. One of the great things about FlyQ is that you can create your flight plan on the device you're on. I'm on an iPad 2 mini, by the way, right now. It's like a 3-year-old, $250 iPad that I'm using for this demo. In addition to that, you can plan it on your iPhone using FlyQ Pocket, or using our new web-based system called Atlas, you can plan it on that using, I'm looking at a 23-inch monitor right now hooked up to my Mac. If I want to do a flight plan on a 23-inch monitor with a mouse and with a keyboard, not on a little 7-inch iPad screen, I can use our new product called Atlas, which is atlas.seattleavionics.com, and I can use that to plan my flight. The flights that I plan there, like the fourth one down, that says KSEA to KEUG, that's Seattle to Eugene, Oregon. That one's on the server because it was created on another device. If I want to look at that, I can just tap on it to load it. So let's take a look. I'll load in that flight plan. I have no idea how complicated this flight plan is or what it's doing. It looks like it's going to a couple of different waypoints. Notice that there's a pop-up that appeared around the top middle of the screen. It says, be sure to download the data for the flight plan. That's a really good reminder on there. You can turn it off if you don't want to. But this again is another great feature of the product. It's about downloading data. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to tap off that pop-up and click on that icon, which is the pre-flight icon right below 9:41 a.m. And that's going to very quickly check and make sure that my GPS is available, that my weather is current, that all the data that I need for is current. Problem there. It looks like I need to download data because my VFR charts for some of this flight have in fact not been downloaded. So if I wanted to do that, I can just hit the download button, which is in the upper right corner of the screen here. I'm not going to do that now. But again, we're using our color coding, green good, red bad. So it's bad here because the VFR charts are not downloaded. You will notice, by the way, that the IFR terminal procedures are neither. They're kind of gray. That's because we're doing a VFR flight. So we're not going to flag problems with IFR data for a VFR flight because most of the time you don't really care. So we're not trying to download any more data than you need for that flight. All right. That's why some of the data isn't downloaded. That's not really a flight directly from the Seattle area to Eugene. There's a little side trip done into Canada. Okay, that explains it. That's why the data wasn't downloaded. Now that we're looking at a flight plan now, a couple of things that you can do about this. So right on my nav log, I see two different airports. I see KSEA and I see Eugene, Oregon. If I want to know information about, say, Eugene, Oregon, I just tap anywhere in that last row there. You don't have to be precise. Just tap anywhere near there. And I see the information about that airport. So I would immediately know that if I want to land at that airport, if you look at those green arrows, that I'm going to be landing from the north. Pretty obvious. Okay. Don't have to do a lot of thinking or read any text. We're big fans of using graphics as opposed to using text. All right. So that's some of the information there. Now you may wonder, well, how do I get back to my nav log? Well, there's no back button or anything like that because we designed the product to be what we call flat, which is to say there's no hierarchical. You don't go from A to B to C and then have to back up from C to B, from B to A. You don't do that. Rather, you just go down to your tab at the bottom and pick plans again. And you're exactly where you left off on your plan. Okay, nice and simple, nice and easy. Other things with your plan. If the font there that you're looking at is a little small, maybe on an iPad mini, it's a little bit small, there's a blue button that looks like a little letter A and a big letter A, right above the word that says route. I'm going to tap on that, and now the fonts get much, much bigger. Tap again, it gets small again. I can use the same thing to do wind optimization. There's a button there that says wind optimizer, and it shows me for different altitudes how long it's going to take me to fly and how much fuel I'm going to use. If I want to set one of those altitudes, like if I wanted to be sure that I'm flying there quickly, I can pick a higher altitude and so on. My weather briefing. I don't have to ask for the weather briefing. The system has already done it for me. So next to the Navlog tab, I can hit the one that says weather brief. And here's my UX briefing. Again, this could be Lockheed Martin if you prefer. Doesn't matter. You can set that yourself. If I want to file this flight plan, it doesn't file automatically because sometimes you plan but you don't really want to fly it. So you hit the FAA Plan tab. You can modify any parameters that you want to here. You can override anything that's in white. And then when you have it the way that you want, you simply file it. Yeah. And you do have to, that's great. So you do have to make sure that the flight plan is actually sometime in the future. So let's talk about that. So towards the top of that, where it's after where it says KSEA, KEUG, it says time, November 12th, 2015. Let's tap on that. I will set that to today, but maybe at 7:40. Okay. I hit the button that says change. So it updates the information. All the flight times and all that kind of stuff gets updated. I hit the file button. And here's our flight plan for that new time. Nice and simple. Okay. So very, very few taps to file a flight plan. And again, I was about to talk anyway about the stuff that's at the top of the navlog can be changed. So if you don't like the name KSEA, KEUG, simply tap anywhere in there and you can call it something like Monday flight. Then there's a button or a text link rather, it says change. I hit change. What it's doing right now is it's recalculating this flight and it's also saving it on the server. So if I have another iPad or if I want to use Atlas or something like that, the same flight plan that we just renamed to be Monday flight will now be Monday flight on all of the other devices we have too. Next to where it says Monday flight, there's a couple of buttons to the right. One is a map button. If I click the button, it looks like map. The screen resizes itself to show me the entire flight plan. A lot of you use Aspen avionics in your aircraft, or you want to print a flight plan or something like that. So the button next to the map that looks like a box with an arrow coming out, that's what we call the action button. It's kind of a generic button on the iPad. You can email the nav log to yourself. You can print it. Printing works if you have what Apple calls an AirPrint printer, which is to say most of the HP wireless printers have the AirPrint capability. Most of the other printers don't, unfortunately. So what you do is, if you want to print it and you have an HP printer, you hit print. If you want to print it and you have some other printer, you would typically hit email. You email a PDF essentially to yourself, and then you print it from your computer, from your PC, or from your Mac. Or as I said again, you can send it to Aspen. In the very, very, very near future of the product, you'll also be able to send that flight plan to a Dynon Skyview system, not in the version of shipping today, but will be very, very soon. Okay. That's a little bit about flight planning, a little on there. There's more things as well. For example, one of the things I really like about split screen, I'm going to switch this to the map view. And I really like flying in 3D mode a lot of the time. So I'm going to switch this to 3D. Nothing will appear. The reason why is because we're not currently flying. So this gives me an opportunity to talk about what's on the upper right-hand corner of the screen. This is a very, very important part of the product. We call these the status indicators. The green here next to GPS is the first one. Tells me that my GPS currently has a locked signal. The one next to it says WX. WX is green, meaning that we have weather that's recent. My ADS-B and my ADS-B battery, though, the one next to it, those are clear because I don't have an ADS-B connected. If I had an ADS-B, it would turn green before we're connected. Or if we were using it, then it's suddenly disconnected, it would turn bright red. It's not bright red right now because we don't want to draw your attention to something you already know, which is to say you're not connected anyway. Okay, that makes sense? So what we try to do is we draw your attention to red stuff in the corner of the screen when there's a problem. We're not going to make something red just because you don't have a device connected. But if you lose that device, it will then turn bright red because then it's important. Okay? So one of the things I want to do here is I want to show you what's like in 3D. The way that I can do that is I can either hook this up to X-Plane, which works. Soon you'll be able to also use Prepara 3D and be able to use Microsoft Flight Simulator. But for the time being, you can use X-Plane or you can use a built-in GPS simulator. You do that by finding out more information about your GPS. You want to find more info about the GPS or about your weather or about your ADS-B. Any of the things that are in the status area, tap on any of those four icons and you see what we call a detail panel. The detail panel shows you more details about your GPS. If I click on weather, it shows me more details about my weather, like did it get downloaded from an ADS-B system or was it downloaded from the internet? And if so, how old is it? If I had an ADS-B connected, it shows me the ADS-B information of when the weather and the traffic and the GPS were updated. If I were connected to ground stations from an ADS-B, it would graphically show me where those ground stations were. Flip up and it would show you how far away they are and so on. But for the time being, that's not relevant. What I want to show you now is when the GPS is connected, I'm going to turn on the simulator. So right on the right-hand side of that pop-up, right below where it says horizontal accuracy, right over here, if you can see the cursor, I'm going to turn the simulator on, and now we're flying. Notice we now have 3D as well. All right, so we're flying along here. You can see yourself in 2D. You can see yourself in 3D. If we did have an ADS-B receiver that has something called an AHRS, that would give us yaw, pitch, and roll. With an AHRS, you get true synthetic vision. So if I were in a 45-degree bank right now, without an AHRS, I'm still going to look like I'm flying level. But if I had an AHRS, then you'd actually see the whole screen rotate, the 3D screen anyway, would rotate at a 45-degree angle. You can also do a lot of other things. You can put obstacles on, you can put TAWs on. Let's do that. On the 2D map, I'm going to turn on one of my other layers, which is TAWs. TAWs is terrain avoidance. That tells us the red, or kind of the orange maybe, tells us that the terrain is either within 100 feet of us or higher than we are. Yellow means that the terrain is within 1,000 feet of us. Okay? You can do the same thing on 3D. If I tap anywhere in the 3D map, the column that lets you set various things on the map pops up for about 6 seconds. It just went away, so I'll tap it again. hit Layers, turn on TAWS. And now you see, if not surprisingly, the mountains in the background are red because, of course, we're going to hit them. Right now, we're in the simulator, and we're rising in altitude, but we're only at about 2,100 feet. So clearly, those mountains are above us, and that's what the 3D is showing us. Okay? That's a lot of things that you can do with the system. You have the ability to show things like, let's say that you're taking a trip and you need to write a couple of notes. You can go to what we call the scratch pad. I'm going to clear this. I'll tell you how to do that in a second. The scratch pad is a multi-page scratch pad. If I want to write down a frequency, like 112.3, I can write that down. If that's my ATIS, I can say that's, ATIS, I don't know, Quebec, something like that. So you can take some notes on the screen there if you want to. I'm going to flip this back to 2D. The way that you get this toggle between 2D and 3D, by the way, the button looks like a 3D cube. And this up here, it's blue right now, meaning we're in 3D mode. If I tap it again, it's now white, and we're back in 2D mode. All right, it's flying along in 2D. If I want to take more notes on the left-hand side of the screen, if you take a look at the top of that scratch pad area, there's a button to the left and a button to the right and a number 1. If I hit the one that goes to the right, that means flip pages to the right. So that's page 2. This now is page 3, page 4, and so on. Very, very easy to do. I'm going to put this back here too for a second. Let's say that since it is actually dark right now, let's say we're concerned about flying at night. One of the problems that you have with an iPad is you can turn the screen brightness down, but let's flip this to an IFR map and put this one on approach plates. So IFR maps and approach plates, let's see if we can find an approach plate near us right now. So I double tapped on Seattle on the map. By the way, double tap to get information, not single. If you tap on the map, it normally won't do anything. We do that intentionally so that you don't hit it by mistake and see all these stupid pop-ups that you have to get rid of. When I double tap on the map, it shows me all the airports and nav aids in the vicinity in one screen. If you look down the bottom of this, it says common airports, nav aids, fixes, TFRs, and so on. The common category shows airports and nav aids only. If you want to see fixes, you can hit fixes and see those. But most of the time, you care about the nav aids and the airports. So what I'm going to do now, if I want to see more information about SeaTac, to look at an approach plate there, I can do it kind of the slow way, which is I pick Seattle, I pick procedures, and then I pick the procedure they want. Or what I can do is something which is actually kind of cool, is I can go back to my map here for a second. I will double tap on the map, and notice right here under the Seattle airport, it has a button that looks again like the stack of papers. That's my procedures. If I tap on that, I immediately go to the procedures at SeaTac. I bypass showing the other airport information, and now I can just look at these, pull up an approach plate that looks interesting. Hopefully I can find one that's close enough to. There we go. All right. So now you see yourself right on the approach plate. So here's what I wanted to talk about. Since it's kind of dark right now, certainly in Seattle, and almost certainly where you are right now, it might be helpful to show you what we call night mode. Night mode takes away all the brightness that's on your iPad, because even if you turn the dimness all the way down, an IFR load chart and an IFR procedure are fundamentally white. So any way you slice it, there's going to be a lot of screen glare. And one of the ways that we get around that is we have a button that looks like half black, half white. It's a universal button, so it's at the top of the screen. Right over here, it looks like a kind of half white and half black moon. If I tap on that, the approach plate immediately becomes basically black, both on the map and just standalone. But notice, so this is not like just triple tapping the home button on your iPad. When you triple tap the button on your iPad, let me see if this works. I don't know. I'm not sure if I can even do that here. No, it doesn't quite work here. When you triple tap the button on your iPad, it inverts all of the colors, meaning that the TAWS, see right now you're looking at TAWS, yellow is nearby but not quite a problem, and red means it's too high. Those colors would be inverted to purple or green or some other goofy color. By doing it this way with the night mode on, you invert anything near black or anything near white, but any other color, like all of those green METAR dots and yellow marginal VFR condition dots, all of those dots remain the proper color, while the map itself becomes much easier to read at night. Looks a little bit like X-ray mode, kind of. I'm just going to move this to a certain spot. Okay, so that's much, much easier to see at night. And you can still flip the map and do other things like that. Flip the approach plates rather, and you see it. Okay, so that's what it's like in night mode. So relatively easy to do. The last thing I want to show you in the product is how you can download some data. So let's do that. If you were taking a flight and you're flying from Seattle down to California, of course you want to make sure that data is downloaded. So we can do that again using this pre-flight checklist to show you before. We already did that. But the reason why that red is here, I'm going to show you the other way to download data, which is a button to the left of the pre-flight checklist that just looks like an arrow pointing down. If I click on that, notice what's on the map here. This is pretty slick. So the magenta line is our flight plan. Our flight plan is superimposed right on our download system. No other product does that. And not only that, this is a very graphical download system. I immediately know, remember, green is good, red is bad, that the Pacific Northwest in California, I've downloaded, it's all current, I'm all ready to go. If I were flying to Kansas, though, it's telling me it's red, meaning that either the data for there has expired or they simply don't have any data at all. Either way, if I were flying to Kansas, I would need to download that data. If I'm not interested in Kansas, I can just tap on that and get rid of it. Nice and easy. If I were flying, though, to Massachusetts, and I may take a little side trip to Connecticut, I can do that. And I'm going to hit the button in the upper right-hand corner there that says Update Now. And it'll begin downloading the data for Connecticut. So now it's downloading data, downloading TFRs, airport diagrams, whatever. I can still click the Done button in the upper left-hand corner, and it will continue to download that data, even while I use a product elsewhere. You can't switch to another application. If you switch to another application on your iPad, or you go back to the home screen, well, at that point, the system will stop downloading the data. But for the time being, it'll download the data as long as you're connected to the internet. You don't have to wait. You can still continue to use the product to do your pre-flight planning, or whatever you like to do. Okay? Let me just check my notes and just see if there's anything else I really want to talk about. One other great feature on the product, one of my personal favorites actually, I'm going to turn on my sectionals. I'm going to bring this back to single screen mode by hitting the button in the upper left. So let's say that we're flying along, we're at about 7,500 feet. Looks like we're flying to California. I'm going to turn my TOS layer off though. And as we're flying to California, I think, well, maybe I can take a little side trip to Southern California and try to cross those mountains in the middle of the screen. So one of the things that you can do is you can take two fingers, put them both on the map at the same time. And this is what we call Terrain X-ray. Terrain X-ray is yet another new feature, another unique feature of the product. In Terrain X-ray, we show you again graphically, green is good, red is bad, that clearly at, right now we're flying at 70, you can see this in the upper left-hand corner. Right now we're flying at 7,500 feet. Since the maximum terrain is 14,268, this would be a really, really bad idea to make that flight. Even if you don't want to read the numbers, you can clearly see from the red that's going to be a problem. Now that the terrain X-ray is on the map, if I grab one corner, I can move that around and see maybe, okay, this is closer. Maybe if I fly more like this, I can still do it. I'd still have to gain some altitude, but maybe closer. I can flip this side. I can grab the left-hand side, move that, move it all around. And your heading, your distance, your winds, all of that information is in this box right here. Notice that the gallons used is different in each direction. Well, why is that? That's because it's taking the winds aloft into account. So it knows that flying one direction is seldom exactly like flying in another direction. So it's giving you time based on expected winds and the number of fuel gallons that you can burn going both ways. Okay, really great feature of the product. Other last things I would do before I turn off, before I go to some other questions, is when you take a look at the gauges on here, the gauges are the things on the top of the screen. If you don't like that particular gauge, like you don't want timer to be there, by the way, very handy feature. But if you didn't like the timer, you can press and hold on it for a couple of seconds. And now you can make it any other gauge. Like if you want to know your, I don't know, closest waypoint, maybe take that. There's closest waypoint. So no matter where you're flying, remember, we're not really right now in California. So we're flying in the Seattle area. So the closest waypoint to us, oh, it moved. Now it's something a little bit different. But the general idea is that you can change all the gauges by pressing and holding and do it that way. It's a very, very easy thing to do. The last thing I'm going to mention is the very first thing that I mentioned, really, which is to say, if you have any questions about using the product, there's a great help feature built in. Again, that's at the top of it. You hit the gear button, and it tells you what version of the software is and so on. But then there's down here where it says technical support and help. Click on that, and you can jump to all the videos. You can download the PDF pilot's guide and print it, read it at your leisure. You can take a look at the ADS-B primer. It tells you all about ADS-B and so on. There's quite a lot that you can do from there. And of course, you can send us email. There's a button right there, send email to support, and we're very happy to answer your questions very quickly. So hopefully that'll give you some idea of what you can do with FlyQ EFB and give you a sense of why so many people love it. It's the highest rated iPad app in the App Store. And the reason, and it has been for about 2 years, the reason is very simple. It takes fewer taps to get to information. And when we show you the information is a lot easier to understand, a lot more graphical, and a lot less tapping around. We think that all the information in the world is useless if you can't read it because the text is too small or because it's so darn complicated to get to. We like to keep it simple and easy to read. That's why we're here. So thank you very much for your time. My name is Steve Zabraszek with Seattle Avionics, and I would remind you to go to seattleavionics.com/webinars if you want to take a look